against it. I think the question is, as you're pointing out, at the end of the day, they probably won't do it. If we get people thinking it's a good idea, it still is a win, right, Destiny?
If they cut the Pentagon?
If they say to
spending?
Cenk on Twitter, we're going to consider that, and then they don't do it, and then right-wingers go, hey, you said you were going to do it, but you didn't do it. That's still a win of sorts.
That would never, you're implying a world where the right wing has the accountability for literally anything they do ever, which will
they've never done
ever,
it, but theoretically.
Yeah. I mean,
Well,
like,
that's not true,
theoretically,
theoretically
in a world where, I can wave
Cenk?
a magic wand.
So I think MAGA has changed in a way that the rest of the country and media ecosystem does not understand. So MAGA in the old days was yes, daddy, harder daddy, right? And so these days, does that wing of MAGA still exist? Absolutely. If Trump, the demigod, says something, they're going to change their position and support him completely. But there is a different wing of right-wing populists now, and I see them openly disagreeing with Trump on Israel, and on several other issues.
What's happening, everybody? Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks and jaw-clenching certified crazy person Destiny were recently both on the David Pakman show. Cenk Uygur and Destiny debated their visions for the future of the Democrat Party. Unsurprisingly, Cenk Uygur looked like a political genius compared to Destiny. With that, let's watch Cenk Uygur counter Destiny's ridiculous pro-establishment, pro-corporate Democrat, Republican derangement syndrome arguments. Let's go.
Sort of both of you on Twitter. Cenk, you kind of went mega viral for responding to Elon Musk and saying, hey, put me in charge of slashing that Pentagon budget. Elon actually replied. He asked for suggestions. Don Jr. replied something like, this is being considered, or it was considered. Destiny, you responded to the entire thing by saying sigh, S-I-G-H. I think my first question to you, Cenk, is, do you think they genuinely want to cut defense spending, or this entire Department of Grifty Edgelords thing is just really about cutting social programs at the end of the day? Or do you really think the Pentagon is something they would cut?
So let's look at this conversation, right? So first of all, why do I call Trump a fake populist? Because he goes rah-rah average man, which I think is smart political strategy, because he's focusing on things that are popular. That's what populism is. Wow, that's rocket science to figure that out, is to the correct electoral strategy. But then when he gets into office, what's his number one priority? Corporate tax cuts and delivering for his donors like Miriam Adelson. He put in Marco Rubio, Elise Stefanik, Mike Waltz, Mike Huckabee, all Team Miriam, neocon warhawks. So what happened? I thought you were anti-war. And part of what I'm doing here is some of the right-wing populists actually do agree with us on some issues. So, for example, anti-corruption. When I point out that Miriam Adelson gave Trump $137 million, and then he gave her 4 appointees, people, even on the right wing, go, yeah, that sucks. And that, we don't agree with Trump there. And that's a stunning turn of events. I've never seen that happen before, but it's actually genuinely happening online, and you should give them some credit for that. Now, on cutting, what I'm asking is, do you guys really mean it? And so if you really mean it, most of the corruption is in the Pentagon. So that's where all the pork goes, because if you question that pork, they go, you're endangering our national security. You're putting all of our lives on the line, et cetera. So they stuff it full of pork. So I said, look, guys, if you're going to do cuts, let's start at the Pentagon. I can cut $400 billion overnight for you. And what it's doing is putting them to the test. Do you really mean it or don't you? And so couple of surprising things happen from there. First of all, if you look at my comment section, right-wing populists actually do mean it. So this is going to be really, really interesting. So then Elon and Don Jr. say, yeah, we mean it too. And they follow through on at least one of the proposals that I mentioned, which was, hey, a lot of these contracts go to these defense contractors because the generals, after they retire, go to work for those defense contractors, and that gives them an incentive to sell us out and to buy all these bloated programs, because they're literally going to get paid by those same companies. And if they say, yes, you're right, which is where they are today, and we should stop that, so that conflict of interest, well, that's a left-wing position that we've been arguing for 20 years. I'll take it. That's fantastic. And that's the unity that mainstream media pretended that they were in favor of, but only when they were doing corporate deals for tax cuts for the rich, etc. Now we have some potential actual unity. At the same time, I'm not a sucker. I've been in this game a long time. So is it possible that they don't cut the Pentagon and instead they cut social spending? Of course, that's more likely, right? But at least the very first conversation we're having online about what to cut is the Pentagon. Perfect. You can't ask for anything better from the left-wing populist way of looking at it.
So, Destiny, tell us about the reason for the sigh. Is it that you think Cenk's being naive, that they're not really going to cut, or that he's barking up the wrong tree here?
I don't think they plan on cutting. I don't even like the conversation. I feel like there's so many issues I have with this. When
If you like watching videos like these, like, subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. Let's get back to the video.
progressives and really with anybody talks about taxes or anybody talks about budgets, like the conversation, people always talk about like taxes like they're either this like tool of punishment or self-flagellation, or it's like this noble way of. I think that we should figure out what are the government programs that we want to fund and why. Okay, so do we want single payer healthcare? Do we want expansion of Medicare? Do we want to do SNAP and WIC and benefits programs? Do we want to have tax subsidies for electric cars and solar? Like, we figure these things out. Once we figure that out, we have our liabilities. Okay, this is how much we owe, and then we need to figure out how do we raise the money for it. Okay, do we tax people? Do we tariff? Do we whatever? Like, how does the government fund these programs? That should be the totality of the conversation about taxes. These arbitrary obsessions with like we got to slash the Pentagon by X dollars. We have to slash the military. Like, why? Why? What do you want to cut? Like, let's talk about that. Do we like was the F-35 program a mistake? Do we want to have like no military presence around the world? Do we shut down all of our bases? Do we want to have no more funding towards any type of participation? They're like, what do we actually want to cut? Because the random thing, like imagine, and it's so crazy to me too, especially because like Cenk is a business owner and all these other guys are business owners. You walk in, you ask, okay, I come into your business and you want to cut things. Like, is it just I'm going to cut 40% of my budget? Did you just fire randomly like 40% of your employees? Or like, no, well, you look at departments maybe that aren't making money. You look at parts of your business maybe you don't need, but it's never just like randomly like, okay, we're going to cut half our thing today, unless you've got like a loan that's being called in and you have to pay up or something. So I mean, like, that's one part of it. The second part of it is it's okay. So to be fully transparent, I'm unhinged now when it comes to dealing with conservatives. I'm more concerned about turning out base than ever appealing to these insane people. There is no principled foundation to what conservatives believe regarding anything having to do with foreign policy or the military. The exact same people who will say there were no wars under Trump will ignore the fact that he hid how much more we were drone striking people in Yemen. People will say there were no more wars under Trump, and they'll ignore the fact that we allowed, the allies that we had in Syria to die. We'll say no more wars under Trump. We'll ignore the fact that Iran attacked Saudi Arabia, that the United States bombed a Syrian airport, that Assad was chemically gassing his people still, that border riots were raging on in the Gaza Strip. Like, it's just, it's ridiculous. So for the first time ever, Russian troops were engaging with Ukrainian troops directly in the Donbass, I think in 2018. This idea that like Trump has some allegiance to some foreign policy position where it's like, oh, we're going to cut military spending is absolutely not true.
Well, even more so then. I mean, if that's true and they'll consider cutting something because Cenk's bringing it up, isn't that a reason for him to be involved rather than saying, this is a waste of time? I don't know.
I mean, I just hope that people are aware of what I just need people to be aware of what's going on. Like, if you get oh, well, they managed to cut $50 million from the military budget and that money, was like all earmarked for the VA or something. Like, that's not a good thing, right? Like, we want, we want something. I wish that people just spoke in policies more rather than like, we need to tax billionaires because we hate them, or like we need to give tax cuts to billionaires because they save us, or we need to do that. It's like, what are the policies that we want to support? What do we want to cut from the military? What do we like? That's, I think, the more important conversations.
Cenk?
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, unfortunately, this is proving at least part of MAGA's point here, which is Destiny's now defending the Pentagon against cuts. Like, that's the neocons. And then we brought in the neocons, the Liz Cheneys and the Dick Cheneys.
Wait, should we abolish our entire military?
No, of course not. I'm going to tell you what to do in a second. But this idea of like, don't touch the Pentagon.
Wait. I never said don't touch the Pentagon. I just said name what you want to get rid of. I didn't say don't touch it. I just said.
So, but you're happy to are you happy to have the conversation about cutting the Pentagon?
The sacrifices I make for my audience. We're watching a video right now of 3 people that if I were locked in a room with them, I would swallow my own tongue within the first maximum 60 seconds. And because Destiny rambles so nonsensically, I had to watch this multiple times. So, I'm really laying it on the line out here for you. If you want to throw a sub my way, that's up to you. I don't, that wasn't my point. Just I really put a lot into this for you guys. Okay, all joking aside, this is the most time I've ever spent preparing for a video because of the reason I just said. I had to watch it over and over because I don't know what Destiny's talking about half the time. You're only going to see like 10 to 15 minutes of this, an hour of Destiny just rambling, not listening to anyone, freaking out on conservatives constantly out of nowhere. He just did it there. He took a question about cutting Pentagon spending and turned it into what a monster Trump is and how much he hates conservatives. I said it to you in the intro. I mean it sincerely. He is probably patient zero for not Trump derangement syndrome, but Republican or conservative derangement syndrome. He loses it anytime you bring up a conservative or Republican. And also, let me just give a disclaimer here that Cenk is saying a lot of stupid stuff too in this dialogue. Just compared to Destiny, he looks like the most sane person alive. I'll get back to the video, but real quick, my take on this whole thing is I want wasteful spending eliminated anywhere that it's found in our government. It's out of control. I don't have the number in front of me, but I'm sure most of you know that the Pentagon lost hundreds of billions of dollars that's unaccounted for. Not like it was in some black op or something or a secret project that they couldn't talk about. They lost it. In my perfect world, and that doesn't count for much, but in my perfect world, Donald Trump would strengthen our military, and that wouldn't be difficult to do because there'd be plenty of money as long as people were held accountable for what they're spending. Oh, and Cenk was 100% right. It's so funny how Destiny has this Republican derangement syndrome, but he does sound in this conversation identical to a neocon. And I don't know anyone that likes them, so it's understandable that no one can stomach Destiny. Anyway, let's get back to the video.
Pentagon first.
If you have a thing you want to cut from it, then yeah, sure.
Okay, so like you're not like, even as a general thing, you're like, well, I'm not sure about cutting the Pentagon. That's amazing to me. So why did I pick the Pentagon? First of all, I would much rather have that than cutting social programs. But more importantly, that's where all the waste is, and that's not theoretical or hypothetical. It's real. They just failed their 7th audit in a row just yesterday. And in the last audit that they failed, they said we can't find $400 billion. Well, if you can't find it, then you're not going to miss it. So that's why I say $400 billion. In 2015, they buried a report that said they had done $125 billion in wasteful spending and didn't know where it went. Not a million, 125 billion. So they're just robbing us blind. The central area of the robbery is the Pentagon. It's not about
when we
keeping us
say
safe.
this money is gone, is this like they can't account for it, or is this like there are certain projects that maybe an Office of Inspector General can't have insight to without clearance, so we don't know? Because you're making
No.
it sound like the money is just like what they're pocketing
Gone.
it, or what?
They can't account for it. They literally
Well, there is a
say,
difference, though, Cenk, between spent on stuff we don't know versus we can't account for it. Those are two different things, admittedly. And I don't know if we have visibility into, is the money gone or are they not able to account for the program spending?
I can't believe I'm having this conversation with two people on the left.
No, Cenk, to be clear, I'm with you on cutting. I'm with you 1,000% on cutting Pentagon. I even would tell you specific things I would cut. My only gripe is I don't know from what I've seen that when they say unaccounted for, it means spent on mystery stuff. I don't know that that's accurate, but I'm with you 100% on cutting.
And so when Elon asked for specific suggestions, I said, look, the reason I did the conflict of interest on the generals first, number one, every real person agrees. The only people who don't agree are the corporate guys who are like, oh, well, of course, once we retire, we should be able to take millions of dollars from these different corporations we've been serving all along. So, but in terms of the budget, I said in my tweet, obviously you'd have to go line by line. If the Pentagon says to me, there's $125 billion in wasteful spending and we don't know where it is, how am I supposed to tell you where it is? They just told us they don't know where it is. So if you give me the details of the plan, look, this is now fantastical, right? Is there any chance that Elon goes, hey, you know what? Cenk's a businessman. He went to Wharton like I did. He's a genuine populist. All right, let's bring him in and let's look at the line items one by one and the Pentagon budget and then take out the wasteful spending. If we did that, do you have any idea how happy the American people would be? And that would be actual unity. They would love it. And we could show them, here's the waste. Here's the thing that didn't work. Here's how they spent 8,000. They did a markup of 8,000% on soap dispensers at Boeing, et cetera, et cetera. Now, are they really going to do that? Probably not. Probably they're going to say, oh, yeah, first we're going to cut Medicaid, Medicare, and everything that helps the average man, and we'll get back to the Pentagon later. That's probably how it'll go. But even if that's how it goes, now a lot of the right-wing populists go, wait a minute, I thought you said you were going to cut the Pentagon. I'm in favor of cutting them. Guys, take the win. Right-wing populists are saying cut the Pentagon. This is what we've been dreaming about our whole lives. And now you're against it? That just doesn't make any sense at all. Take the win.
I'm for it. I don't know. I'm certainly not against it. I think the question is, as you're pointing out, at the end of the day, they probably won't do it. If we get people thinking it's a good idea, it still is a win, right, Destiny?
If they cut the Pentagon?
If they say to Cenk on Twitter, we're going to consider that, and then they don't do it, and then right-wingers go, hey, you said you were going to do it, but you didn't do it. That's still a win of sorts.
That would never, you're implying a world where the right wing has the accountability for literally anything they do ever, which will
they've never done it, but theoretically.
Yeah. I mean, like theoretically, theoretically in a world where I can wave a magic wand.
So I think MAGA has changed in a way that the rest of the country and media ecosystem does not understand. So MAGA in the old days was yes, daddy, harder daddy, right? And so these days, does that wing of MAGA still exist? Absolutely. If Trump, the demigod, says something, they're going to change their position and support him completely. But there is a different wing of right-wing populists now. And I see them openly disagreeing with Trump on Israel, and on several other issues. So, maybe I'm wrong. And then you guys will get to say, oh, I can't believe it. You thought that there was any right-wing populist who actually meant anything and had principles. That's such a joke. They all wound up saying, no, add to the Pentagon. Let the generals take any job they want. Israel first, America eighth. If it turns out I'm wrong about that and all the right-wing populists were frauds and they all just fall in line and do whatever Trump demands of them, including following all of his donors' dictates, then okay, I'll own up to being wrong. But I think that right-wing populism does exist and it will challenge Trump on some things and probably Israel first.
Yeah, the party that elected the guy who's working with the richest man in the world and has now put him in charge of a faux government agency to cut government spending as this guy enriches himself by tens of billions of dollars. I'm sorry, I'm not buying that one at all. That's an unbelievable position to actually be in. That as much as we might hate the corporate donor class or whatever, and then vote for Donald Trump, who literally received how much media coverage? Like, how much did Elon spend? $44 billion to buy Twitter to turn it into a Trump marketing platform? That's unreal to me that anybody would think that something good is coming from that.
All right, I've subjected you to a very long video, but the purpose of the video was to show not just how awful Destiny is, but also how bad his arguments are. He had me fooled early on when I didn't know anything about him and I just saw him debating. I was like, wow, this guy knows a lot. And he does. He knows a lot of information, but he just verbally diarrheas it all over you. And then he used to have me like confused, like, wow, he must be talking over my head. No, he's just spewing a bunch of facts that somehow might be interrelated. It sounds smart from like a 10,000 foot view, but if you break it down, as I unfortunately had to with this video, he's not saying anything. He is consumed with anger against the Republicans. And I think he has the attention span of a gnat. When someone else is talking, I think he's in his mind thinking, all right, normal human beings usually wait until someone else talks, so that's what I'll do. But I already know exactly what I want to say. He's not even listening to give them a response. He's just ready to spew whenever the person stops talking. He's like, all right, that's my cue. Now, this may be the first time in my life I've ever seen Cenk Uygur speechless. Did you see after he argued, hey, we need, we should reel in the Pentagon spending and look at ways to cut? And David Pakman and especially Destiny just gave every argument in the book, and Cenk was visibly speechless. You see his face? He was like, he said, I can't believe I'm talking to two people on the left wing right now. I mean, talking has never been Cenk's weakness. So for him to be speechless, you had to really be spouting some nonsense. And Destiny's sitting there bitching about Elon. Dude, you had Elon. Your party is such a mess and so whacked out of its mind, you lost him. And now you're complaining that he's supporting our side because it's the only logical, rational side? All right, last thing before I go. In recent videos, I've mentioned, hey, I can't argue with Cenk. He's making a good point on this. And again, in this video, I mean, I disagree with tons of things that he said. But compared to Destiny, he looks like the man who could solve all of the world's problems. Anyway, so I've given him credit where credit is due. But one thing, you know how Cenk does that stupid, of course thing? You know what I'm talking about? If you've watched him at all, you've heard him do it. That is so cringy. It's ridiculous because you know that one time he said that during, a Young Turks episode or something. And someone was like, that was really awesome. That should be your catchphrase from now on. He was like, yeah, people love that. He needs to ixnay that from his vocabulary. Anyway, that's it for this video. If you like watching sane, normal, logical, rational people make good points and make insane, unhinged people look like the idiots that they are, then click on one of the two videos that just popped up on your screen. Otherwise, as always, I really, really appreciate you being here. The end.